So this is my last workshop of the day. This is the awesome guys at DPD. Hervé here. I hired Hervé a long, long time ago when he was about 12. Right? I hired him. He was part of my team at DPD, so I'm delighted. His career has gone on. Since I left, he's done really well. But he's now the global group e-commerce director. Yeah?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and Thiemo van Spellen is the group global accounts managing director, if I've got that right. Okay? So, you know the form, guys. We want it interactive. We're going to ask you questions. Feel free to ask questions of these guys, as many as you like. Can I just have a show of hands? How many retailers we have in the group?
Good.
Yeah. If you sell products and you deliver them somewhere in Europe, yeah, for me, that makes you a retailer. Okay. Great. Over to you guys, please deliver your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, John, and thank you all for attending. And it's a pleasure to meet you again. Yeah, it's quite some time now, but yeah, glad to see you again, and have the pleasure to be with Thiemo, who is my director. And today the idea is to give you some insights on the e-shopper barometer, which is a survey we made last year. And the idea as well is to talk about this year, which is total, I mean, the story is quite different than last year. And the idea is as well to talk about the impacts on the consumers, the retailers, and the supply chain as well. So let's go back last year. Last year was an incredible year. 2020 was already. You can see that in 2020 the e-commerce was growing by 27% in Europe. Last year was still growing by 13%. We know as well that Eastern Europe was growing faster than Western Europe, but still growing. So that's a very good thing we could see. And as well, we know that there was this growth because of structural elements, like we could have new clients, senior people, more rural, the fact as well that people were buying more types of products online than before. And as well, we've seen the purchasing frequency, which was much higher than in the previous years. And with this growth, we can see that last year, the online represented 13% of the total online retail in Europe. It's 1 point more than in 2020. And again, there are some differences between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. Western Europe, the online represents more than 15% of the total retail, when in Eastern Europe it's much more, 10 to 11%. And we know that UK is where you're living, John, is a very mature market, and we have in the UK last year more than 1/3 of the total retail which was online, actually. So this was to give you a picture of 2021. 2021 was quite a good year. And as well, last year, we made a research, what we call e-shopper barometer. It's the 5th year that we've been running this survey, and we've been running it into 31 countries around the world, with 40,000 e-shoppers being interviewed. And in Europe, which will be the focus of this survey, we have made the survey in 21 countries. So what we could see that people were buying more online, and we tried to segment the e-shoppers. And what we see, the regular e-shoppers, which we define the ones which buy more than once a week, so the ones on average with 5.5 parcels received in the month, which are regular ones, they represent 48% of the total consumer base. And those 48% represent 86% of the total spent in Europe. So half of the people represent the bulk, let's say, of the total spend. So they're very, very important for you as retailer and e-retailers. And we're going to give you some insights on how they behave and the type of profiles that we've seen. If I go to next slides, we see that those e-shoppers, especially we saw that they were buying more type of products than before, than in the past. And really it's what we call newcomers, the fact that there is no strong boundaries between offline and online, because people get used, because some stores were closed and so on, they were used to buy online. So there is no boundaries, it's kind of a continuum between offline and online. So before we were talking about omnichannel, so online, offline, and now we speak more about newcomers, where both are together, and we don't have to think about, let's say, the consumers are buying online or offline, but it's kind of continuum. What was interesting last year is that people were going on the web less for having the good deals. So we have 5 points less than in 2019. So the difference you see, the little triangles, is between 2019 and 2021. In 2020, we could not run this survey because of the COVID. It was going to skew, they said, the results. And just to mention as well, this survey that we make for the 5th time is really, fueling our strategy, because it's very important for us. We are in contact with the shippers, that's right, but the consumers decide as well. So it's very, very important for us to understand the behaviors and the shifts of behavior. So one of the learnings is that people were going less on the web to find the good deals, right? And I think, anyway, we'll talk through it. In 2022, it's going to change. As well, we know that what's very important for the consumers, it's regarding sustainability. So really asking manufacturers, retailers to be stronger in terms of sustainable products, and as well for us as carriers to provide more sustainable deliveries. We had many people, during the COVID, were seeing in the streets a lot of packages and so on in the streets. So really one of the drawback of the e-commerce was the fact that, somewhat there is some kind of more pollution than it was before. If we move to the next slide, this is where we see the type of products that people are buying.
Maybe one addition. Yes. So if you go back to the previous slide, what's an interesting, and that's also one of the questions I have for the retailers in this room, so to say, is that the question on the right, the 69% of online shoppers having, let's say, a CO2 neutral or sustainability as a driver to buy a product online in their decision-making process. The question, are you also willing to pay additional to use that option, was a little over 40% of the people that were in the research. So it's a less big group. And my question to the retailers would be, how do you deal with that? Is that something that you already do, charge additional, or have differences in offering the option? Or is it something that you don't dare to do yet? Because saying yes in a survey is one, but pushing on the I buy button is of course two.
So just to jump in there?
Yeah.
So the question is there is evidence to say that 40% of those, 40% of the 69 said they would pay a little bit more for a green delivery, for a more sustainable delivery. So therefore, by definition, there was 20+% of that group so 40% of the 69, so there was 60% of the 69 wouldn't pay any more.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Any comments, any reactions to that? Is that surprising, or when it comes to price versus planet, what's your opinion?
I mean, this is a very clear trend. I mean, if you look back 2-3 years, then there was 12% willing to pay more. And if you were asking them how much are you willing to pay more, it was 10 to 50 cents. I think this, from my experience, this has really strongly risen. Right. So people are much more aware now, and people are much more changing the world also for the better. And you can see that people are also buying fashion that is not fast fashion anymore, slow fashion and sustainable fashion. And these people are also willing to pay more for the environment, and that's something that has really drastically changed over the last few years. 40% might still be a minority, but it is already like 3 times, 4 times as much as it was a few years back.
Okay, interesting. There you go. Anybody else want to make a comment there? For the retailers, is that kind of what you expect? That's the feeling you have in terms of price sensitivity? I guess so.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
It's true that to have some very precise figures, we need to have some very specific market research on pricing, because the intent is good, but what's going to be in real life, certainly growing intention to pay more, but what will be real life, it will be good to have some insights from some of the e-retailers. But yeah, would have been good to have a comment, but let's move on the next step. Regarding product categories, we could see that fashion and shoes were the most bought product online. It's no revelation. I mean, that's something we knew. Fashion is really the first category online, the e-commerce. What was kind of growing is the beauty and food supplements. Under this logo, there is beauty and food supplements. It's true that people who were, quite concerned about the COVID, their health, and so on. So food supplements really performed very, very well last year. And striking figures that we saw is regarding groceries and fresh food, which really grew a lot last year. So that's because as well of the stores being closed, but as well we could see the rise of a lot of companies on the quick commerce, providing the ability to be delivered very, very quickly. And actually I think that this trend, the fact that people buy more on food, they get quite accustomed on the fact to be delivered more quickly than they were before. And if we take a look at China, because we made this survey in China, the food business is much bigger than in Europe, right? And through the food business, when I talked to some of the main players in China, they said that the fact that people are used to be delivered quickly, they are used to have their food delivery, but as well in China, you can buy many types of products on the marketplaces. So it creates a habit to be delivered more quickly and more precisely than before. So maybe it's kind of a trend that we'll see. During COVID, people were not so much concerned about the speed of delivery, but with the food now, I think that it gives back the intent of the consumers and the willingness to be delivered more quickly.
Okay.
Now, what we've seen as well, we try to profile the different consumers, e-shoppers. And what we saw, there were quite some opposite trends that we could see. One is unrestrained consumerism. It's where people were really, always on, always wanting to buy online, to have the latest offer, latest products, and so on. So they are really what we call the aficionados of the e-commerce and buying online. And on the other extent, we could see as well some profiles of consumers which were having a very different trend and much more concern about economy and as well ecology. So some people would much more buy on the reselling, on the refurbished items, and as well some being much more in favor of group purchasing and as well to be delivered in a longer time than they were in the past. This said, those two kind of behaviors are not opposite. Some people, depending on the time, on what they are buying in terms of products, they can as well switch from one behavior to another. So if there are two trends, they are not totally opposite. Some people can switch from one to another. Now, if we talk where people are buying from, we can see that there is a downward trend, slightly one, last year. But when we look in more details, we see that we could see that flows, buying from China was much lower, -6% than 2019. So this can be explained because of the pandemic in China, but as well because of the EU regulation, VAT, which was put in place in July last year, and it increased the price of the goods from China. And we saw then a drop of goods purchased from China. If we take a deep dive in Europe, we could see in reverse some increase of buying into Europe. And there's one specificity there. We could see that to the UK and from the UK, people were buying less. So really the increase in Europe is Europe mainland. And we had 8% of the UK regular e-shoppers which were saying that they stopped trading cross-border, because of the customs and the complexity that there was.
Yeah, this was not only on the e-shopper side, but this was also on the supplier side, so the e-seller side. We saw mainly in the mid-sized and smaller companies. We saw sometimes companies even stopping the exports to the UK due to the complexity or the additional costs. So it was on both sides, both demand and supply.
So can I just jump in and maybe ask the audience a question? So do you think this is a temporary adjustment, post-COVID, post-Brexit, a little bit complicated, but it will in time revert back to the previous sort of percentages?
It will recover to some extent, it's our expectation at least, but probably not completely back to the old levels, because we saw also some movements of warehouse activities from the UK to European mainland, vice versa, but most from the UK to the European mainland. So at some point business will come back to normal, but a part of the market is simply lost, because also the value of goods to sell online will now be higher due to the additional costs. So especially the lower priced products will probably not come back in the export to the UK.
Okay. Does anybody in the audience have a personal perspective on this? Maybe you've chosen to move some warehouses or change your logistics operation in light of Brexit or post-COVID. Anybody got a story they want to share? No? Herbalife? No? Okay. So somebody must have a story they can share about how the last 2 years has changed the way you think about things. I mean, this Chinese figure dropping by 6, is that 6%?
Yes,
right.
6 points, yes.
I mean, is that because it's difficult sourcing stuff from China because of lockdown? They're still in significant lockdown, so people are sourcing elsewhere, or do you think it's a seismic shift in the way people think, and it's going to be much more local sourcing to more dependable economies?
Well, one of the key elements, I think, is because there were additional costs, and adding on the VAT, which a lot of parcels from China were exempt, let's say, adding up 20, 25, 30% on top, you know, there is a high price elasticity, so people were concerned about paying 20, 25% more than before. And we could see actually that a lot of Chinese flows as well were implementing warehouses in Europe as well, to do some bulk into Europe and then ship.
Okay, interesting. We'll have to wait and see if it's permanent or just a temporary shift. Okay.
Yes, and actually we have a little video which kind of wrap up of the main learnings that we had through this survey. So if we can play this video, it lasts 1 minute max. Can we have the... Oh, I can do this? Ah, it's magic. Okay, this is good. And I think you've been distributed with the shopper barometer results, so you can have a more deep dive into the results and more see as well the different profiles we could identify. And now, yeah, the idea is 2021 was what we described and what we saw through the shopper barometer. And now the situation has really, really changed since then. A lot of things have happened. And you know that inflation is growing. We talk about it every day. The latest Eurostat figures show that in Europe the inflation is 8.1%. So the results are in May. In Netherlands is 10%. In France it's nearly 6%. And actually the indicators which could forecast the next 2 to 3 months shows that we should reach plus 10% inflation by this summer, actually. So really inflation is, in everyday's life, and I think you're facing this, I guess. We do as well. And as well, rising cost of fuel, and for our business that's a very strong impact. And quoting again the Eurostat figures, Eurostat showed that the rising cost of energy as a whole is plus 39% up to May. So it's very, very, very strong.
And the development of that, of course, is very uncertain. I mean, today in the news in the Netherlands was that we have reached record levels of the pump price for regular fuel at over €2.50. And who knows when it's going to go down again, how long it will stay at these levels. It's impacting the full supply chain, not only consumers, of course, but also the full supply chain, and we'll explain a little bit more later.
As well, the war in Ukraine, which is extremely sad, really gives on the face and faces on the rising inflation. So it's really, especially on energy, but as well on food like cereals. Really, it's increasing the inflation. Also, supply shortage. Maybe you heard about the chips shortage, which is impacting the automotive industry, but as well many other types of electronics and high-tech industry. So in different areas, supply shortage has really an impact on the economy. So, and sometimes when you buy on the websites as well, you see that those garments or so on are not available. It's because as well there is a very strong issue, and the fact that there was a lockdown in an area of China really impacted as well the supply chain.
And try ordering a car. I mean, delivery times for having a car is 9 months plus at this moment, and try to order electrical vans for your last mile delivery. Delivery times are already over a year, so it's really impacting a lot the business.
Definitely, yeah. And e-commerce growth, I mean, even before COVID, we could see a kind of maturity of the e-commerce growth in Europe and worldwide. And now we see that as well coming back again. The latest figures that I could see on Salesforce Consumer Index were showing that Q1 this year, there was a minus 13% in terms of GMV, in terms of e-commerce, versus Q1 2021. The thing is, Q1 2021 was very, very specific because there were a lot of lockdowns in Europe. So it's a minus 13%, but let's see how it ramp up later in the year, because we would have a more stable comparison to last year from April, May. But still, we have seen forecasts for the European e-commerce, which will be by 2025 under 10%. So what we've been experiencing 2020 and 2021 were really exceptional, but we'll go back onto the trend of maturing e-commerce. And as well, what we don't mention is as well the fact that unemployment rate is extremely low. I think in Netherlands is 3.2%. In Spain, it's being 13% at the moment, but it's extremely low in their standards, and they could, for the first time since 2008, have less than 3 million unemployed people. And just last week, I don't know if you heard, in Spain, but the government is easing the visa so that you could have people, coming to Spain to work on tourism, technology, and so on. So really, as well, unemployment rate has an impact as well on the growing uncertainties, because it's difficult to find the right people at the right place at the right moment so that you can continue your business.
Yeah, and maybe I think most of us will experience that also in getting the people into the company in all types of roles, especially also in the operational part. In our sorting centers, for instance, it's very challenging. But the impact is, of course, I mean, most of you will have traveled probably via Schiphol Airport if you flew in. Well, good luck on your way back, because also there we see that lack of staffing is causing a lot of issues on a daily basis.
Yeah,
I've got to say, guys, the next slide is going to lift us a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know about the rest of you, but
It's not.
you know, it's like a perfect storm of
Yeah. It doesn't cheer you up.
No, not a lot.
No.
No, for
So
sure.
what good news have you got for everybody?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about cybersecurity, but I will not talk about
Oh,
it,
just kill us. You talk about cybersecurity. Bloody hell.
especially in e-commerce. Yeah, so what is the impact on the consumers, retailers, carriers? So yeah, again, not positive. Confidence of consumers is in the is extremely low. The good thing is not as low as when the COVID was tracking. That's the European index, which is something like -22, and not -25 like with the COVID lockdown. So let's say it's not as down as 2 years ago. But you've certainly seen that as well, that the sales and the fact that people were buying from you is maybe certainly down. I guess that some product categories are better than the other ones. Certainly food is trading better than furniture, for instance, because there are some goods which were bought during the COVID, which you cannot deliver, you cannot buy, every day or every 3 months. Furniture, sofa, you keep it for a few years at least. So is there any experience some would like to share on what's happening in terms of consumer consumption?
Anybody sees the opposite in his or her business at this moment?
I've got a question for you. So based on the previous slide and all these global issues, inflation, Ukraine, supply chain problem, recruiting people, what kind of a peak are you anticipating? October, November, December? Are you anticipating, first of all, will DPD and the other parcel companies be able to cope in terms of fuel cost, vehicles? Say 12 months to order an electric vehicle, and getting your people in the warehouses, people to deliver the parcels. These guys, retailers are going to be concerned that you're not going to be able to cope. So I know you plan months in advance. What kind of peak are you expecting?
We expect actually that peak will be not as extreme, of course, as it has been in the past 2 years. Due to COVID, of course, the parcel market exploded and had to manage peak volumes that were above the available capacity, quite honestly, all through the market. And that has also driven the rising of, let's say, newcomers on the market or scale-up startups who have grabbed bigger parts of the market. I think most of the parcel carriers, for sure DPD did, accelerated the investment program to add capacity to the network, because we needed it. We were full for 2 years in the peak moments. Now that volumes are a little bit down compared to, at least in the growth rates, compared to the past 2 years, I don't think that capacity will be the real issue, not in sorting capacity, sorting centers, drivers on the road. We don't really foresee the biggest issue there, although drivers touches the labor market, and that is, I think, the key challenge in the coming months, to get the right numbers of people in. And we also saw in last year-end peak in autumn 2021 that at some days 25 to 30% of the people that needed to be in the sorting centers to be able to get everything out just did not show up due to COVID, being sick or whatever. And with that big peak volumes, having so many people lacking, you can never get everything out. So for this autumn period, it's a long answer, but the long answer is no, we don't foresee issues because we have the capacity. But if we have another COVID peak and people start falling out again, everybody will have issues. So will we. Yeah.
So, but the good news is you've invested in infrastructure, and you're going to cope with the peak, smash the service levels.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Has anybody got any questions they want to ask these guys before the next slide? From your point of view, you've obviously got your own forecasting, your own views on how volume is going to increase or not. Is the consensus amongst the retailers here that you're going to have a good peak a normal peak or a poor peak? Hands up anybody who's anticipating a poor peak, a flat. So you're all going to experience a good peak, yeah? This is fantastic. Yeah. Or maybe you're just all tired. Tired of me and tired of this. Anyway, carry on, guys.
Okay.
There's some good news, though. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, yeah. Yeah, the question you were asking as well was to ask as well on retailers, what do you see? But yeah, carriers, yeah, we could face some topic. I mean, labor, it's a key concern that we have, so we'll be working on it. That's why it's important as well to receive the forecast from the retailers, e-retailers, so we can plan in advance. That's really, really key, and we do that actually. Now is the time for us to know better what will be your forecast, so that we can plan, yeah, the labor force, but as well vehicles and so on. Yeah, in terms of impact as well for us, buying, you know, we saw that people want to be more environmentally responsible and ask the brands, the carriers to be more responsible in that respect. And for us, buying some electric trucks is taking much longer. So it's not there is not a willingness to accelerate, but what are the means we can have to as well do the last mile with lower emissions, or the middle mile, and so on. So for us, this can potentially impact some of our plans in terms of reduction of CO2 emissions.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then maybe to the opportunities, or at least, if I can call it opportunities, on the next one. Yeah.
Yes.
So new economic order, that is actually what we see at this moment. Everything has changed, and indeed, John, it doesn't really cheer you up if you see all these issues in a row. And of course, we don't have all the answers to all of that, but there are 3 areas where we think we need to focus on, and that's also what we want to discuss with you, where we see that we should focus on to at least mitigate as much as we can, or win as much as we can in the market again. I think the first one, and we'll explain in 3 different slides afterward, with only one picture on it. First one is being resilient. I think that's pretty obvious. We'll explain in the next slide. The second one, yeah, might also sound like an open door, but for us, it is a little bit more. There's a little bit more to it. So customer centricity, of course. And the reason that I say this, in our world, every parcel that we deliver has 2 customers. So it's the one sending the product and selling the product to their customer, and it's the one receiving the product because they have bought it. And that is the dynamic that we are in, and that is our world of customer centricity. And the third one, of course, about sustainability, which is obvious to think about green. And being CO2 neutral, but sustainability is not only on the environment, it's also on the economical part. So being in business to also be in business in 10 or 20 years from now, that's also sustainability. And that's also something that we would like to discuss. So maybe if we go to the next, resilience in our case, just showing our presence on the European continent. And of course, we are also very much active outside of Europe. Resilience for us also is in scale. So it's also in being a European player, having a firm position in most of the European countries with an own network. Local branding, but it's one connected network. In most countries, we are the number 1, number 2, or number 3 player. And what this picture does not show, and that's for us one of the focus areas in the coming years at least, is in the connection between these countries. So on the cross-border part, it is for us important to be more than the sum of domestic carrier networks, but it's really being a European network and boosting cross-border export. That's actually the business that we are in. So that's our, let's say, the biggest part of our definition of resilience. Yeah. So a lot of newcomers entering the market the last years, disruptors, mostly on the digital part, being very digitally savvy and combining that with the assets of the parcel companies. that is a development that is there, that will never go away again, and that we need to embrace and grow together. We also see some of the newcomers who had very much tailwind during the COVID pandemic, and who are now suffering a little bit more now that volumes are under pressure. So for us, a very relevant development to keep monitoring and just stay on our course.
Yeah, and resilience is to absorb and to adapt. And we could see as well during the COVID that some retailers were opening as well new warehouses, like in the UK because of the Brexit, or vice versa, mainland. And as well in the UK putting more stock before the Brexit, so that they can have the ability to still deliver domestically in UK. We could see as well that some retailers, which has some stores, actually were doing some ship from store, preparing orders from their stores and enabling click and collect or enabling ship from store. So really, yeah, resilience is as well of meaning of the adaptability as well of the supply chain to the different concerns.
Yep. Customer centricity. It's what I just said. On the left, there's the shippers, that's the retailers, that's the companies who send the products to the ones who have ordered them. And on the right-hand side, it's the consignee, so it's the customer of our customer. And on the left-hand side, when we talk customer centricity, we often think about the paying customer, the one paying the invoice, which is the crucial one, because if he or she is not satisfied, you will not retain the business or grow the business, that's obvious. So there for us it's all about being transparent in data, in reporting, delivering what we have promised. That is very obvious. But it's also about the one on the right. It's about the customer of our customer. And that's where the most of our development and IT development is in. Because we see a trend, and that's also visible in the eShopper barometer every year, that the consignee really wants to be in control of the whole process, from ordering the product to having it delivered wherever, at home, at an out-of-home location, in a store, in a neighborhood point, in a locker, whatever. And there we invest a lot in getting the right tooling, the right communication tooling, in predict services, in apps that we roll out, to have also the profiles of the shippers or the preferences of the shippers, either generically or when the parcel is on the way. And that's a very important thing to keep investing in.
Can I just ask you a question on this one? So it's always been DPD's DNA to be locally dynamic and adaptive, right?
Yeah.
So do you still see locally adapted solutions? So the Poland option of last mile solutions is slightly different than the Spanish one or the Italian one or the UK one?
For sure. There must be a baseline that is equal in all countries. But due to the local differences, and that's also why we still firmly believe in local entrepreneurship in all these countries, with a central layer on top of that. But consumers are different per country. And you will see if you read the full report of the eShopper barometer. We even have reports available per country specific for all these European countries, all these 21. And there you see that, for instance, cash on delivery, which is very common in the Eastern European markets and in some Southern European markets, where it's a necessity to offer to be able to be in business and to grow the business, where in the Western European countries it's even stopped already because nobody uses it again. And it's just one of the examples of the necessity of being locally adapted.
Okay.
Not only for us, but also for the ones selling products in these countries.
You've mentioned a few times the barometer report, so I got the impression that it's available for them to get a copy?
It is, yeah.
How do they get a copy of that?
We handed out a few already here, but of course on our stand, just let us know, and we can give you a lot more information on specific countries if you require that.
Okay. As well, we have a specific URL where you can see the results and cross-check the results from different countries to see the results country per country. So
okay.
I just wanted to add up one thing regarding personalization. We know that in e-commerce, personalization is something really, really key, and that's where we invest. Like we've got the My DPD app, which has been rolled out in quite some countries, more than 10 so far. And this is where we get as well insights from the end consumer saying, how best can we deliver, because sometimes it's not really easy to deliver the right place, but as well on maybe some time window where they don't want that we deliver because they know they will not be there. So really personalization, we're working on it as well to satisfy the end consignee and in the end as well the shipper, the retailers and manufacturers.
Yeah, and the last one that we mentioned out of the three is sustainability, where, as I said, it's not only about the environment, where I think the whole market is now developing more rapidly into being CO2 neutral as soon as possible. And in the Netherlands now there's a discussion in the media on reducing the livestock, the number of cows in the country, just to show how big that discussion is, because they are causing too much CO2 emission. That causes even the fact that houses cannot be built in the pace that we need them in Holland. So it's a very big impact, but it also impacts all our businesses, consumers demanding more for it. Also in our business, which has the image of being polluting because we drive a lot, we are investing heavily in migrating everything into electrical or bicycles for the urban deliveries. And now also shifting the past year and in the coming years to the middle mile, which is less visible, because the vans everybody sees on the street, and that's the most visible part, so that's why we started. But looking at the CO2 emissions, also the trucks, bringing all these parcels from one country to the other, from one sorting center to the other, are part of this ambition to migrate all of them to a green solution in the coming years. And on the left-hand side, of course, it's the economical part, where sustainability, sustainability for companies, of course, it's being in business to also be there in a number of years. But I think most of you will also recognize the struggle that everybody is now in getting the cost increases compensated by your customers, and on the other hand, trying to lower the rates of your suppliers because you need to save costs as well. But yeah, most companies are both a supplier and the buyer, so it's also a very challenging one, where, to be quite honest, we are also struggling a little bit to find the right balance there. But I think you will recognize that. Anybody want to comment on that? No?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, good.
Is that your last slide?
Yeah, that's the last slide. And yeah, maybe the idea is to work, I mean, on the environmental part, work together as well. Because, for instance, for us, delivering the first, the highest level first delivery attempt, getting the right address, right data is something important. As well, when we talk about parcels, you know, we don't like to transport air. We would like to have some packages that are nice and fit. I think for the benefit for everyone and for the planet in the end. So really the idea is as well to work together. We can optimize the operations, save CO2, save some costs as well in the end.
Cool, brilliant. Any final questions, Paul? Wait 1 second for the microphone. We can't hear you.
Me?
Yeah. Try it again.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah. Paul Eden from CP Research. 2 questions. I'll try to keep them small, not too big. If you're able to tell us anything about how your own volumes are progressing at the moment, that would be very interesting, of course. What about the B2B comeback? Because that's the story you didn't mention at all here. Obviously, on the B2C side, the trends are very clear to everybody. One aspect, of course, is also the reopening of physical shops. People no longer being at home, buying online, but going to the shops and all the rest of it. So how do you see that playing out at the moment? You know, to what extent will B2B come back? To what extent will there be a kind of a new normal, or where will the new normal be? Obviously, the last few years, you've seen B2C grow dramatically. You've seen low, moderate, low single-digit growth in B2B, I suspect. So how do you see B2C versus B2C playing out?
Yeah, I think on the volume development, so the first part of your question, I think we see the same as everybody sees, that compared to the last 2 years, of course, and compared to last year, volumes are really showing a decline. But if we compare it to the last, let's say, normal year before COVID, 2019, on average, we are still looking very, very strong on growth. So if you take the CAGR over those years, I think we are above the growth levels of the years before. So that is still looking very well. And on the B2B, yes, you are right. The comeback of B2B, I think everybody, we at least had expected more of that comeback of B2B, which is a bit more sluggish than we had expected. And yes, we are still focusing on that. For us, B2B is still a big part of our business. It's almost half of our business is still B2B. But let's be quite honest, the rapidly growing part, and in the future, in a few years' time, our expectations are that 75% of the total parcel market consists of B2C, online, mainly online shopping. That is really the focus area for most of the developments and innovations, and that's why we focus so much on it. And for the B2B part, yeah, that's more yeah, managing what we have and trying to get as much as we can. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Brilliant, guys. Thank you, Thiemo. Thank you, Hervé. Fantastic presentation, very illuminating. If you want a copy of that report, go visit them on the stand. They've got them, and get your names down because they do it every year. Get yourself on the mailing list. It's a really good read. So thank you, guys. Very good presentation.